Wow, my hair is still a mess. Okay, let's see how this is sounding. How the lighting is, and how my mic is turning out. If there is a lot of gain in this microphone that I have, because it's been causing issues and giving me static. Yeah, there's something about the transition from the OBS studios to the YouTube, because I'm using a third-party streaming service, that the mic kind of has some issues. Anyways, my name is Jacob. I'm the owner, operator of A-Free Designs, Manzanares Woodworking, and in the evenings, because it is a bajillion degrees out in the desert, I restore hand planes. Some of them I keep, some of them I resell, and that's the beginning of what I'm doing today, which is Tool Time Thursday. I've been doing this for a while now, not that much longer than I've been alive. I've only been doing this for about a month and a half, it feels like. Yeah, and so it's Tool Time Thursday. I'm going to talk about some tools, talk about some times, talk about Thursdays. I'm not actually going to talk about Thursdays, I'm just going to talk about tools and times. But right here in this picture, I'm going to make myself really big. That's my bad hair. And I'm going to make myself really small. Yep, tiny little corner. I have an array of different hand planes across the generations, across the different styles. And I'm going to start off this live stream with just talking about a little bit about those hand planes, and what makes them different, what makes them unique, what they're used for, and then I'm just going to kind of put the music on a little bit louder. Have this music in the background. Oh, there's no music in the background. That is interesting. Oh, here it goes. Must have been lagging out. I'm going to put some music on in the background a little bit louder, and from there I am going to just sharpen up some tools, hone in some tools I've been working on. But for now, it is just me, just the shade, this light, because I didn't do a good job lighting the studio today. And I'm just going to get started. Yeah, so I'm going to start from the past and then move a little bit forward, and just going to kind of move on from there. So I'm going to put a couple of these hand planes over to the side. Put my water over there. Put baby hand plane. Excellent style. Presentation. Alright. So I'm going to start right here with this hand plane. This is one that I recently picked up in a lot on eBay. It is a granite ECE hand plane. These are made in Germany, very well made, well manufactured hand planes, and it is just a simple woodblock hand plane. These are kind of seen almost as luxury items, it feels like, in the woodworking world nowadays. Maybe something about their simplicity, or maybe it is just there's a bit of novelty around it. People seem to find a lot of interest and joy in using these. I have been enjoying using this, but mostly because of how light it is. So it does pretty much the same work as a block plane, similar to this, which is a pretty... Ooh, where is my camera in this? Which is similar to this. This is probably, if you're a Western woodworker, you've seen this style of block plane before. It's something you can keep in your pocket, almost looks like a beetle. And it's either used with a reverse grip, you pull it, or It's used as a tiny, tiny, tiny little hand plane, and you push it. But this is basically the larger version of that, and this is what was used for most of time. There are some records of in Rome, Pompeii, of some metal body hand planes being preserved, but this is basically what most craftsmen would use as planes. A wooden body plane with some kind of metal iron, usually not with a chip breaker, a metal iron and a wedge. And then the way these are adjusted, it's pretty simple. Get all that in. If you want to push your iron forward, you hit it on the back. If you want to knock the iron out, you hit it on the rear of it. And it is a little bit odd, so I'm gonna push this in, lock it in place. And I'm actually gonna do it live. Gotta get my hammer here. Okay. So I normally wouldn't use this hammer. I have a wooden hammer that I usually use. So I'm gonna try to get this best I can. How am I gonna show this? What is up with my internet? Maybe that thing needs to get reset. Okay. So right now there is no gap. The blade is just barely touching this ruler. So I'm gonna take my hammer. Nothing too crazy. Just give it a couple light whacks. I went a little bit more dramatic this time than I have in the past, or how I normally would use this particular hand plane. I really just can't get the angle on this, but you can kind of tell. Okay, that blade is sticking out right at the bottom. And say I want to retract this. Most of the time with those older hand planes that people would make in their garages or workshops or wherever they would make hand planes, they would not put in a bolt or any kind of backing. It would just be the wood backing. So I'm sorry, this is going to be loud. Oh, that just loosened it. Maybe this mallet is just a little bit too strong. Try to do that again. Okay. Well, I'm no good at doing this over the camera, but the idea is that you hit in the back and the blade pops out. So this is pretty much what was used in different lengths, different dimensions for basically 1,000 years. The problem with using a completely wooden body hand plane is that it does not stay perfectly level. This is a very nice piece of some kind of like white oak. It's a really solid design. It's like this heat treated material, so this isn't really going to move all that much. But what people would have in their garages or anything that was widely produced would tend to bow and flex and give any variation, minor variations over the course of its life. So its benefit of being light was outweighed by the starting demand for more and more tools. And for a short time in the early 1800s, before full cast iron body planes became really popular, we got these hybrid planes. The hybrid planes, as you can see, it is a hybrid. It has a bit of a cast iron body to it that holds the blade, the chip breaker, the lever cap, the knob and tote, but its body is made out of some kind of hardwood. This one's made out of maple, but pretty much any hardwood would really do as long as it is one with a consistent grain pattern that can be replicated and holds its shape. This was a nice upgrade from the woodblock planes because, unlike this one, as time goes on, this opening right here is going to open more. There's going to be wear on it, especially for a day-to-day craftsman, and eventually this body will go bad and it will be thrown away in a burn pile or turned into a scrub plane. The benefit for one of these hybrid planes is that the building of this block body is pretty simple and straightforward, and so once this did wear out, it is pretty easy for the craftsperson just to take this top body, chip away a hole inside the plane, and then they were able to get back to work. And I'm going to take this apart so you can see just how this thing actually works. Alright, I'm going to put some of this stuff away and start clearing up some space because things to talk about today. Okay. This is also a Fulton Tool Company branded plane. These were built in the later part of the 1800s, I believe. Don't quote me on that because I didn't look it up. It's just off my memory. There's my face saying, wink. The bowls. I'll use this piece of tape just for a temporary bowl. This is another one of my eBay Beaver Dream purchases in those lots that I bought. I have not actually taken one of these apart before, so I don't really know all the details of how to get this thing to break open, but I'm sure I will be able to figure it out. Starting with or the tote off. Just a single large bolt. Tote made out of, weirdly it looks like some kind of bleached, looks like walnut almost. The grain pattern looks walnutty, but it feels more like cherry. So I'm gonna guess it's cherry, and I'm just having a poor time being able to guess this. And look at this little baby knob. This is so cute. I don't really know if this would be any good for use, but it's quite adorable. Okay, let's see if this thing pops off now. Nope, feels like there's one more thing sticking it to the base. Another thing I noticed about these this particular hybrid hand plane is that the iron and chip breaker are significantly thicker than the iron and chip breaker of most Stanley or most modern hand planes. This right here. So if we take a look, maybe hard to tell, but this one is definitely a little bit thicker than this one on the side. This is from a Stanley 1945 type, either 16 or 17, a post-World War one. And I believe the reasoning behind this is to avoid something called chatter. So when a blade is cutting through hard wood, it tends to have a lot of resistance, and a blade that's a little bit thinner will tend to bow and flex and basically create these tiny little vibrations as it goes over the wood. That can be mitigated through a good frog and a good body for your hand plane. Oh, interesting. But if those are not well made, or they are inconsistent, like one where the blade is so much farther above where the mouth of the body is, you might need a thicker iron in order to avoid that chatter. That's my speculation. If somebody scrolls by in the comments, yeah, I'm gonna actually put that in the comments because there's one person watching. Thank you, one person, for watching. I appreciate you. And I'm gonna put a little comment here. Do hybrid planes thicker blades to avoid chatter. Question mark. And I'm gonna leave that in the comments, and maybe someone in the comments or a passerby will be able to answer that query of mine. Just keep taking this thing apart. Also, all the screws are held in place just with these wood screws, and unlike the machined drill holes of the other metal body planes, these just go right into the lumber. Just imagine if you are adjusting this frog a lot, that will cause problems over time. Okay, this is our little frog. It is just a little guy. Nothing too crazy. It's basically half a frog. And we're taking off the rest of our iron body. So, you can see here that the actual body of the plane is pretty simple. It is just a walnut chunk of wood, and this has aged as many pieces of wood do. Not super great, but is still in usable condition. Yeah, and that's what makes this kind of different than our wood block planes. That the valuable part of this is actually this chunk right here, this metal half body. And this is just something that anyone that has been able to flatten a board will be able to make with relative ease, as long as they're able to cut a consistent mortise at this 45 degrees, give a little groove here, and it looks like they literally just took a grinder or chisel and just gave a little bit of a groove there for the blade adjuster. I wouldn't say this is the nicest of hybrid planes that I've ever come across. Its adjusters are pretty loose. Even this one doesn't feel like that well machined. It sits on its body pretty loose, but overall, pretty nice. I am going to be trying to create a longer body plane using this hybrid body, something that I can use as a jointer. Because could be using big old Stanley. This is a number 6 and it's pretty heavy, and if I'm going to be doing a lot of woodworking or a lot of jointing one day, which sometimes I have to, this can get pretty exhausting, even though it does make my life a little bit easier. Alright, I'm going to put these screws away for now. Move on with the show. That's the intermission song. It's the intermission song. Mission song. Intermission song. Da 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 da. It's an intermission song. It's an intermission song. Alright. Where was I? Yes. So after the hybrid planes, we moved on to these full casted iron hand planes. And so we had our Stanley Bailey hand planes that came out in the mid part of the 1800s that were a full cast iron body. These were easily replicated and gave consistent results because the foot of the hand plane only had to be adjusted a few times in its lifetime. This here is one of the early models of hand plane, and I got this one in the lot that I got, and this is a Type 5. So this hand plane was manufactured in 1887, which is making it coming up on 150 years, just a handful more years until then. Doing my math correctly, 13 plus 20. Yeah, we're getting there with this one. So this Type 5, I've recently restored it. It has a lot of the modern features you'd see in a hand plane. Cast iron body, tote, knob, lateral adjusters, blade adjusters. The thing that it does not have is the frog adjuster in the back of the hand plane. That was just not something that was developed yet. It was not something that was implemented yet, and it wouldn't be implemented till the, I think, Type 7 or 8, maybe even the Type 9s. I think I might have some around here, but none on this desk, so we're not going to talk about them. But this is the Type 5 Stanley. Really solid, really good hand plane, and good little piece of history. So as hand planes started getting better, I'm gonna skip over a couple generations, and this is not necessarily the creme de la creme of hand planes. This is in fact, actually, I'm gonna bust out. I have one. Okay, well, we're just gonna jump over that chunk of history. So these were developed, and I have one that I'm putting back together that I was restoring, and they went through a period of the golden age of hand planes, which produced things like the Stanley Sweethearts and the Stanley Bedrocks, which I don't have any pictures of right now because I missed playing this live stream video, which is only me here anyways, so that's cool. We got later on, post World War II was kind of the downfall of Stanley hand planes. As manufacturing got cheaper overseas and less skilled labor was working in manufacturing plants, times just changed, and Stanley kind of lost its edge a little bit. It moved a lot of its production into Europe to find cheaper labor and cheaper materials. And so a lot of the really high-end machining, a lot of the high-end manufacturing was lost during that time. And there's a few different times where that ebbed and flowed, but the post-World War II and the more recent times are probably the most drastic or the most obvious of difficult times for Stanley handplane manufacturing. But as time went on, post Type 5, the largest adjustment and the things you want to look for when you are looking for a handplane is this little nut right there. You can kind of see my finger poking through this little nut right here. And this is our frog adjuster nut. And its whole purpose is to be able to adjust the frog, and if you need to take this apart for any reason, you can leave that nut right where it is, take off the frog, clean it, sharpen it, do whatever you gotta do, and then you can plop that piece right back where it came from and pretty much not lose a beat. It's also able to help you creep up if you need to close the mouth a little bit. You can loosen up these two bolts on the frog, and from there you can use your frog adjustment screw and push it a little farther forward. And so that kind of takes us to the modern age of hand planes. And I kind of was talking about how manufacturing moved overseas, we got cheaper parts, and in that post-World War II time there was also shortages of material, and so things like these beautiful rosewood handles were instead replaced with hand planes that their handles were, like this one. They were painted with a dark stain or a lacquered, and they may have had some like cheaper parts put on there. Instead of having brass wheels, some of them would have plastic wheels. You would also notice like these thicker beds, and that was just because of the poor quality or the less skilled casting, that there's just less skilled labor. Another big noticeable thing that happened in that post-World War II time was, in order to save material, Stanley started putting these little gaps in the frog. Now, I'm not really sure how much material this actually saves when manufacturing these hand planes, given how much material is actually on the hand plane, but they're just these kind of tiny little grooves made into the frog, where the older frogs, try to zoom in here. The older frogs have more of this flat design with only variations to fit our chip breaker screw here. And some people believe that these little gaps actually increase the chatter that the blade will have when it's going over wood. I don't know if it actually makes any difference. I haven't noticed any difference between my Sweetheart planes, which have a full frog, versus my more recent hand planes that have less of a frog. It hasn't really changed anything for me personally. Now, where there is some issue with this is more low-end hand planes or other kind of faux manufactured hand planes, or Stanley copies. That's kind of a hot topic anyways. Maybe I'll get into that another time, because Stanley basically strong-armed a bunch of different companies into forcing them to give up the rights or going under the control of Stanley, Tool and Level, to basically be owned by Stanley. And so companies that try to start making their own hand planes really flopped because they were bought out by Stanley. Anyways, a lot of Stanley copies came out once their patent expired, and there was also different ways that they decided to try and save material, and it also came down to the frog. Now, there are these frogs like this, where they have a significant amount of the body is mostly in these grooves. They have these indents in them, and I've noticed that there is a difference when cutting with these, that there is a lot of chatter. Part of the reason, I believe, is that the blade and the frog have to have a very strong, flat connection. And a lot of these hand planes, when they were built, pretty much the entire frog was just dipped into the Japanning. And so you can see here that there isn't these kind of shiny metal sections. It is all just Japanning all the way through. And even though Japanning is a very tough enamel-like material, there is going to be slight variations in that material, and there's going to be a slight amount of give in comparison to casted iron. And so with that, I do expect that it gives a bit more of, there's a bit more chatter involved in that. Another thing that I have noticed in these both older hand planes, unscrew this to demonstrate, is that, oh wow, come on, I even get this to look. Okay, so we have the body of the hand plane right here, and then we have our frog. The frog does not touch the body, the base of the frog does not touch the body of the hand plane. And because of that, I'm gonna try to get these so I can compare them. It's kind of difficult. I need to take off the toe on this one. We're just destroying tools here. Breaking them apart piece by piece. So we have this Type 5, and then we have this later model unknown hand plane. If you can identify this hand plane in my right hand, please do in the comments. Okay. So the difference between, oh my god, this is so difficult. These two hand planes, you can see that the frog on this one is almost completely to the mouth of the hand plane. Both of these are, even though it's kind of difficult to see in the camera, both of these have a completely straight line of sight if you run along the frog all the way to the mouth of the hand plane. And so this one is just, our Stanley is just over the mouth. So the blade has a lot of room to rest on the frog before it has to touch wood. Whereas this mystery kind of Stanley copy has good amount of distance between our frog and the mouth. And so that leaves basically our blade kind of floating in space just for a little bit, and when it hits a big knot, there is a chance that this whole blade can tend to bow and flex, leading to tear out, leading to clogging, leading to a whole bunch of stuff that you don't really want when you are woodworking. And so some of these cheaper knockoffs were not machined to the highest of quality. They were fine for a hobbyist at the time, but not really up to super high standards. I should just put this together because I will definitely lose all these pieces. Do-do-do-do-do. Put that there. Put this back on right here. That is part of the reason why these older Stanleys are so revered and why people still use them today. So even though this is a 140-year-old piece of metal, it is still a very good user hand plane. And yeah, if someone put this in their shop, it would serve them extremely well, and it's not necessarily an artifact. It is just a nice tool that can be used and will do a good job. Once these things are restored, they're pretty much as good as the day that you bought them, or they were originally bought. That's not the right. This doesn't look right. This one goes here. This one goes there. This one goes here. This one goes there. Yeah, and they are nice collectors, but sometimes these old vintage hand tools have been used for ages and ages and ages, and they do eventually run out. When these hand tools were made, it's basically one piece of metal that the tip of it is, I forget what the process is called, but when you... Hey, thanks. Yeah, it is like the little things that make the difference in these hand planes. And there's also a difference in the way that cheaper hand planes make their blades versus... So, from the last show of Critters and Carving, I kept carving after I ended the show. I kind of sat here, it was very meditative, listened to some music, and at some point, I cut my finger open, blood everywhere. It was a great time, but now I have very limited action in my left hand, so I'm trying to reach over to grab this blade, but I'm all thumbs here. Yeah. So the way that these blades are made it is a single sheet of iron, and the back half of it is not heat treated to be hardened, but the front half is. So you can kind of tell on this one how much this blade has actually been used. This is basically a typical length for a blade. If I want to compare it here to a Stanley, these are two blades. So, though this thing is 140 years old, in those 140 years, I'm sure it was not used the entire time because they probably would have just gotten a replacement blade, but in that time, the craftsman who used it until it had about an inch of blade left. And you can use this blade all the way until it gets to the very end of this keyhole here. It's hardened a little bit past that, and so that's when its life has fully ended, once it is just an edge there. I've never picked up one that has had this little blade before. This is probably the least amount of blade that I've ever seen on one of these, but it still has a lot of life left, and once you get to that point, you can still keep this as a vintage piece of history. It does have a pretty neat little label at the top of it, which is difficult with the lighting that I have here, but you can just get a replacement blade. And pretty much all hand plain blades from that time, and recent times have been made pretty much the same. A lot of third-party sellers sell hand plane blades that also are a little bit thicker, and I do hear that they do a little bit of a better job, and they will still fit perfectly fine with all the vintage hardware. Okay. So that is our little details there. A lot of these cheaper blades, some that you find at Harbor Freights or Amazon Basics, it really comes down to the iron. They don't harden them, and you can tell that but probably by the first time you sharpen it is how much of a burr you will get when you sharpen it the first time. A hard blade will not give you much of a burr. It'll take you a while to start to get that little hair that's going to be coming off the other side of the blade as you sharpen it. But a cheap, soft piece of metal, as you go through it, you will start to feel a large burr, and it won't come off very easily. It might be sharp the first time you use it, but the blade will just not last, and you'll be chewing through that thing and having to sharpen it all the time. I have noticed there's some mid-generation Stanleys where I feel like maybe the quality control is not up to snuff, and the blade is needed to be sharpened all the time. But I've noticed that mostly with the vintage hand planes, they do fine for a long period of time, and I can work, if I'm doing like smoothing for half a day, they will do fine, and I just have to give it a few laps on the leather strap and it'll be back up to working condition. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about some other little planes. So we kind of talked about the differences in the main hand planes, those 3s, 4s, and 5s. Didn't really get into that. Now I'm going to talk about these block planes. Block planes are ones that you can't just kind of keep around. They're there to do simple, straightforward tasks. They're not meant to be workhorses. It's just if you need to smooth one little piece of material or just get a corner cut down, a block plane is perfect for that. These are ones that I found cheap and restored, as I do with most of the tools that I have, just because I thought they were kind of interesting. And they're a little bit more complicated than your average block plane. I think there was a period where people thought that block planes could have the same amount of moving parts as their older brothers, but they really don't need all these bells and whistles. It's cool to have them, but they don't need a piece that adjusts the blade back and forth. It's nice, but it's not something that I really ever use. The plane that I use most, I don't really use this one. I think it's a clunky kind of mess. It feels like a weird hybrid between a chisel and a full-on hand plane. It has this wooden handle in the front, which I think is kind of goofy and also kind of cool at the same time. But this little knob right here really gets in my way. I prefer either a block plane that looks like this. This is one of my users. You can see it's very dusty, where it just has a solid handle. If it has a wood handle, that's cool too. Most of the time, I'll use a block plane like this, grabbing it from the back and just holding the whole thing. But the hand plane I use the most is this little guy right here. Look at him, so cute. This adorable little Union 103. It also has a nifty little adjuster in the back, but I keep this one in my apron pocket. I did not clean it before I pulled it out. I just grabbed it because I wanted to share it and show it off. It's a very cute little plane. It has a little thumb hole here, so if I am doing something, I can put my thumb there. But most of the time, I just grab it in my hand like this, and I'll take the piece of wood that I'm trying to cut. Sure do. There's wood everywhere in this house. Okay, not on that side, that's the show side. So I'll take it like this, and I'll just peel along the back. And it'll leave this nice little chamfer. Yep. Nice. Okay, we're gonna dust that off. Take my little curly fuse away. So, oh wow, it is already 6:45. That's crazy, time goes. Okay, so when you're looking for a hand plane, if you're ever in the market for a hand plane, things you want to look out for or look for is your frog with a full frog on it to reduce that chatter. Those the frog adjuster screw, and you also want to make sure that it is in actual good condition. So there are certain things that you can kind of be more relaxed with. Say if there is a crack in the handle, it's pretty easy to get some super glue and just fix that right up. There is a long bolt that runs through the handles, and so, or the totes, so once that's in there, it's not really going to be going anywhere. There's not too much strain on it. If the knob horn is broken off, it can also be replaced. If you're buying a hand plane, typically you have the skills to replace this, or you are willing to try it. The wood pieces can really be replaced. They can be fixed. The things you don't want are a blade that has gone all the way down, and you also don't want any cracks or chips in the body of the hand plane. A little bit of rust. Oh, this one has a little bit of rust that is eaten away at the foot here, and that's okay. This is still going to be a perfectly flat surface. If the rust has gotten all the way down to the blade, and it has eaten away so much that the blade is not able to be flattened anymore, that blade is pretty much useless. Same with our frog. But the main thing that happens with these cast iron bodies is that at some point they get dropped, and they hit the wrong way, and they crack. So this is what happens when a cast iron body cracks. Usually leaves just one large splinter all the way down the side, and they are pretty much not impossible, but I don't know any metal workers that are able to actually repair a casted iron body anymore. The reason that is because cast iron bodies are a continuous piece. It's not like layered steel. I think I've talked about this before, but as you put a weld in, it heats up the entire body of the plane, and then as the plane cools, the weld cracks. So you have to find somebody that has a machine that they are able to heat up the entire plane in uniform, and then do the weld while the body is still hot, and then all of the weld and the plane have to cool simultaneously, and you have to build it in such a way that both the material of the plane and the weld, as seasons change, it will cool and shrink and grow in uniform with that weld. And so this is kind of a neat collector, this little number 101 plane that I have here that I found at a yard sale, but It will probably never be an actual functional plane. Um, yeah, it's just the nature of it. If I ever want to use it for something, I'd probably just use it for the iron and make myself a little block plane, because that's what people do. There is one little block plane that I have. This is what I would do with it if I ever wanted to. This is what looks like somebody's woodworking project. At some point, it's made out of a little bit of maple and a lot of Douglas fir, which is pretty much just it's what you build to build houses with. So you can just pick most of this material off up at Home Depot, and it looks like that's what happened. Someone took some drills, drilled some holes, took a filed this thing down, took a literal just piece of iron. I don't think they hardened it in any specific way, and they just shoved it in this piece here, took another piece of of Douglas fir, didn't even smooth down one side, just plopped it together and made this little miniature model of a block plane, and I kind of love it. I think it is the most adorable thing. It is super not ergonomic. It's kind of the same idea as one of these block planes where it has this little handle, but there's not really a good way to grip it or hold it. But it just goes to show that like these tools are just upgrades from what people have been able to make for thousands of years. This is just a fancier version of someone that put a metal wedge in a little wood block that they cut a hole into. And this works just fine. This works just as fine as one of these, works just as fine as this. And yeah, it's kind of fascinating that we have changed so much and we've gotten into these levels of hand planes that are so complex out of all these bells and whistles. And that is a pretty recent addition to our human history as woodworkers, because for so long we just used wooden blocks with metal pieces in them, and that did just fine. And some great heirloom furniture that has lasted hundreds of years was made out of stuff like this. In times before people really had wide use of sandpaper, they made perfectly smooth items without any tear out, without any showing of imperfections, with just wood block planes. So if you really want to get into woodworking and you don't want to buy these kind of beetle looking hand planes, they're dark metal, you can still just make yourself a little wooden block and use that probably for the rest of your life, or you just keep making them every couple years as you use them and break them. Because unlike this metal thing, which can't really be melted down into anything, once this thing breaks, it can be still used as an excellent piece of firewood. So its uses are infinite, I suppose. There you go. Okay, wow, I talked a long time about tools. I expected to have more time. I do not have much time to actually get into the whole everything about sharpening that I was going to get into and how that has changed over time. But I'm just going to use a little line here. This cute little row. These tools get bigger. Alright. Well, that was an hour. Does anyone have any questions in the audience today? about tools. Maybe I can answer, maybe I can't, and maybe I won't if I'm feeling sassy. Not, that is okay too. Alright. Well, I think I'm going to end the live stream there. And next Tuesday, which is Critters and Carving Tuesday, I am going to be talking about the snakes of the desert. Yes, that's right, the snakes of the desert, the rattlesnakes, the gopher snakes, big snakes, the little snakes, what is a snake, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully I'll be learning a bit more because I get the time to research that. But we will see. Where's your cut glove? My cut glove? I didn't cut my glove, I cut my finger. Yeah, it was that was the problem. I also just don't. I should wear gloves. I've been noticing that this has been staining my hand. I think something about the different wood finishes that I've been using, and also the iron that I've been dealing with for your left hand for carving. Oh, this, you just want to see it? There it is. Let's see if it focuses up. It's healed pretty well. Really tell too much. The lighting's pretty poor, but you really can't tell in this lighting. Also, my hands are still just stained from I was working with finish today for a headboard that I've been making. But what basically happened? Your stainless steel glove. I really should just get one. I think I'm gonna put on gloves because I still just do need to sharpen a few of these hand planes for work tomorrow, and I have a couple that I'm selling, and I also just like tune them up and hone them up. I want to get those out tomorrow too. But pretty much what happened is I'll use this rusty old knife, is as I was carving, I was pushing really hard. I was holding the piece like this, and it slipped through the bottom of it, and the top of the blade, you can kind of tell here, this camera's just not that good. So I cut off a sliver of this finger, and so that piece of skin came right off, but it didn't go through to the inner layers of my finger, and then the blade kind of just went thunk, and sunk about half a centimeter into my pointer finger here. And I kind of just like looked at it because it just sat right into it, and so then I just pulled it out, and I was like, ah, dang. And immediately it just started going. But I should be using a stainless steel glove. I also kind of ignored one of the big rules of working with carving is I started getting a lot of resistance, and it's lagging. I started getting a lot of resistance in the wood, and I was just trying to push through and trying to just kind of get this piece done, and that's always a mistake because it never works out. And so eventually the knife did give, and it cut all the way through the wood and all the way through my finger, and I think I hit the bone a bit. That's probably what stopped it, honestly. But it was a very sharp knife, and so I didn't really feel it. It didn't really hurt that much. It just kind of bled a lot, which is crazy when you're working with a razor. is that it hurt later, but in the moment and as I cleaned it, it didn't really hurt at all, which was kind of interesting. Maybe I was just the adrenaline. Alright, well, that's the show. And I need some better lighting here. Not my best lit show. But thank you for the questions, Tim. Appreciate you being the #1 fan of the show. And that is it. Be logging off and finishing up my work for the day. Finishing up. So, logging off. I logged off. Show disappearing to the far corner of the map. And also, this one is gonna disappear too. Leaving just the darkness, the void. Good night, everyone. Good night. Goodbye. Oh.